But the other thing is it really depends on your goals too. I know that's kind of like a cop out, but if a firm is kind of in crazy growth mode, odds are they're going to need someone in-house to manage all these things, spin all the plates, and help them get from, wherever they're at to where they want to go.
Well, hello and welcome to the J. Sterling Hughes Show, where we share the straight truth on how we have scaled our family law practice from 0 to 25 attorneys and doing over $15 million in revenue. And my purpose here is to document what's working and what's not working in our practice with hopes that you can take that, you can recontextualize that for your practice and shorten your success curve. And my guest today is Bo Royal. I'm so excited to talk about some of the stuff that we're going to get into because I could totally nerd out on it, but we're going to keep it high level because it's really, really good information for those of you that are wanting to scale your practice and even start it up and maybe just grow it incrementally. So we're going to get into that. And Bo, I know you're the co-founder of Pareto Legal and Pareto PPC, and you've got a really great background. So I'm going to kind of tell a quick story as I introduce you here, Bo. Okay, so just pardon me as I just jabber on for a second here. But Bo and I's past overlaps a little bit. So Bo, you were an agency executive and you handled big brands. I know you worked for eBay and a couple other ones that maybe you'll get into that are spending millions of dollars, sharp elbows. You're fighting with other big spenders. And when I took like a 10-year hiatus from law, I owned an agency that sold Dish Network. And so we were spending $500,000 a month regularly and all in direct response stuff. And when you spend that kind of money, you can learn that every 0.1% improvement really, really matters because it means real dollars. So my background was fighting with these other competitors that were super smart, and you have that same background too. You've taken that and you've brought it into law just like I did, but in a different type of clients. But I can't wait to get into your thinking on why you chose law and so forth. So I'll quit talking and let's first off, why did you make the jump from that world to serving lawyers?
First off, Jeff, thanks for having me on today. Super excited to dive into this with you. So to answer the question of why, I guess now I've been in the legal marketing space for 8 years. And I guess it was back in 2016, I was in charge of a large team at the agency I was at. And I felt at that time that I was a small cog in a big wheel, right? Mm-hmm. So I had exposure to these Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 brands where I was in charge of, $100 million budgets for some of these brands. For example, wow. Calvin Klein, one of our biggest clients, their Google Ads budget was something like $100 million a year. Like insane budgets.
Serious credit card points there, by the way, if they were doing seriously.
That. So. but it was great to get that experience earlier on in my career, but I definitely felt at that point, to some extent, unfulfilled, and I was ready for a change. I think the other thing too was I was burned out. I was working like 70, 80-hour weeks, and I was like, there's got to be another, world out there where I can apply this knowledge that I've gained and not have to be, burning at both ends, right?
Yeah.
So that was 8 years ago, and I did a complete 180, and I ended up becoming the chief marketing officer of a large injury law firm in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
The thing I remember about that time was it was definitely a little scary because I was going from, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 to, a smaller type of business. And the other thing that didn't help was the CFO at the time of that agency, when he heard that I was leaving, kind of pulled me aside and was like, this doesn't really make sense. Like you're making a mistake here. Like you have such a great opportunity in this role. You can kind of leverage that into bigger positions in the Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 space down the line. Like, why are you taking a step back? And I'll be honest, I was kind of freaked out by that feedback, but candidly, looking back now, 8 years later, it was the best decision I could have made.
Yeah. What was the budget of that firm you went to? Like, I'm trying to get a point of comparison here.
Sure. Their marketing budget when I joined was about $2 million a year.
Okay.
So a significant decrease.
Yeah.
But this is the fun part. I was their jack of all trades, master of none hire. I was their first marketing in-house person when I joined the firm. So in those first 6, 12, 18 months, I got so much exposure to channels and problems that I never would have encountered had I stayed in my role at eBay, right? So that was part of the allure, was that I had become a real subject matter expert in paid search, paid advertising. I was kind of hungry to branch out and learn more about things like SEO, web development, things of that nature, right? So that was part of the allure. And like I said, that was 8 years later, and it was the best decision I ever made. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't have become an agency owner, because I, like a lot of agency owners, am an accidental agency owner. When I left eBay, 2 of my clients then reached out to me separately and said, "Hey, Bo, would you like to freelance for us?" And I was like, what? Like, you actually want to pay me to do this for you directly? And that's when my entrepreneurial kind of brain kicked in. And I was like, wait, if they think I'm good enough to do this, other companies might think so. And that was kind of how the agency started, was accidentally.
So we're talking about Pareto Legal, right? Or Pareto PPC.
Talking about Pareto. So Pareto PPC was my first agency after leaving eBay. And that was, and still is, a more horizontally positioned agency. We do pay-per-click marketing, Google, we do Meta, we do Microsoft advertising for all different types of businesses. And then Pareto Legal was developed almost a year ago. I think we're at 11 months now. And that's more vertically positioned, niche down specifically on lawyers, even more specifically on injury law firms. And we do both or 3 things rather. We do the paid advertising, we'll do the conversion rate optimization, and then we'll also do the analytics and reporting. Yeah,
you're helping these firms do more than just generate traffic. You want to be able to do something with it and turn that into dollars.
Cases, yep.
Which really what matters. That's what we're concerned about, right? We can get all the traffic in the world, but if we can't make money off of it, then no one cares. Work. So,
right.
Yeah. So how long were you at the law firm before you branched out and started your agency?
I was at the law firm while I started the agency, and I was very upfront and clear with the managing partner that, my role here is at the law firm is my primary focus, and this is something I'm going to kind of build as a side hustle on the side. And that worked for the first 2.5 years, and then that agency kind of became a big time suck, and I stepped into an advisory board member seat at that law firm. I'm still involved with the firm to this day, but it's not, I'm not spending, 50, 60 hours a week on the firm. It's a fraction of my time.
Yeah. So Pareto is one of my heroes. So I've built my life around the Pareto principle. So this is obvious, right? You've named your firm after, I forget the guy's first name, the Italian Pareto guy. What's his first name? Do you remember?
I think it's Vilfredo or Alfredo.
Alfredo, yeah. That's a great name. It sounds tough, like he's in the mafia or something. So you started your agency 2.5 years-ish into it. You focus exclusively on the agency, and you've grown it over the time since then.
Yes. Brought on a co-founder who oversees all of our operations. And we've hired full-time pretty much exclusively in the US up until this point. We are looking to make some offshore hires over the next year. But we're a small boutique team. I'm not trying to become, a massive agency. I think there's a real need for boutique, vertically focused agencies today that just specialize in 1 or 2 things specifically, that don't try to be, the one size fits all, try to do everything and anything, right? So that's really where we kind of fit in the marketplace today.
I support that guy. I preach that a lot because our firm made all of our jumps after we focus on family law. So I'm in family law, as you know, my friends, a lot of these listeners on the podcast here are really focused on family law. So let's zero in on that and how we can add value to some of these firms as they're looking to grow. So prior to the podcast here, you and I were talking about a number of different things, and we got into the idea of the decision points that firms have to make when they know they need help online, and they're thinking, do I go with an agency, roll the dice there? Do I find a consultant because they're out there too, kind of like just below an agency perhaps? Or do I just try to find someone in-house and take on that responsibility to have a salary as well? So how do you advise your clients to think through that? I want to ask just directionally here, how do you advise them on this? And when does a firm become more of an ideal client for you where you can support them?
Yeah, I really think the agency versus in-house thing is determined based on the life cycle of the firm, right? Like where they're at in their journey. And I would say for a firm that maybe their marketing budget is $100,000, $200,000, like up to $1 million, it probably makes sense to use third parties to help you, manage that budget. Obviously, though, that's going to come at the expense of the managing partner's time, or whoever is put in charge of overseeing those vendors. I'd say once the budget gets to $1 million plus, it may make sense to bring a full-time in-house person in to take some of that third-party work, right? So it might mean taking the SEO side or taking the web side of things, and then still having some agencies in place that kind of round out the areas that they're not very well versed in, right? So there's this idea of like a T-shaped marketer where you hire someone that is very, very proficient in like one or two channels. And I think for law firms, probably the T-shaped marketer that you're looking for is going to be really, really specialized in either SEO or the paid side, paid search, kind of like what my team does, right? Yeah. I think those are the two good ones to look for. The other thing I'll say is, like, let's say your budget's, $10 million or $20 million, like you have a huge marketing budget. I think that's where the hybrid model works really well, where you have a blend of both in-house and you have marketing partners that round out the weak areas for your practice, whether that's, if you have a T-shaped marketer that's really good at the paid side, maybe you have a company that's handling the SEO and the web and the link building and all of that good stuff, right? Yeah. So the other thing I'll say is, like, life cycle is a part of it, or where the business is at is a part of it. But the other thing is, it really depends on your goals too. I know that's kind of like a cop out, but if a firm is kind of in crazy growth mode, odds are they're going to need someone in-house to manage all these things, spin all the plates, and help them get from wherever they're at to where they want to go. If they're more in this kind of maintain and like, let's try to pull as much profit out of the business, in that case, maybe it does make more sense to use a third party, because you have much more control over the costs. If they're not hitting your goals, it's kind of relatively easy to part company with them, right? So I think the goals are a big contributing factor, and then where the business is at in terms of their budget are two real big things that you should consider when you're balancing or weighing which is better for your firm, in-house or agency.
Yeah. So someone that's a smaller type firm, 1 to 3 attorneys, their budget's likely not going to be over that $1 million threshold. So working with a well-rounded agency is really a good place to start. But as they grow, start blending that in is what you've recommended.
Yes.
Yeah. And ironically, that's how our firm, exactly. We're in-house from the very beginning, but today, even in our budget, we're well north of several million a year, and we do some in-house, most of it in-house, but we also supplement that because there's just so much going on. It changes so quick. You just can't rely on your team keeping up with that. It's just too much.
Agreed. And the other thing I'll say too, as that budget increases for your firm, the reason it's so important to have someone in-house is because they need to act as a feedback loop to the agency. And let me be more precise. Things like, what is lead quality like this month? How many of the leads have we generated? Have we signed up? That's really important data that needs to be fed back to the agency partners so that they can make the right optimizations to the channels that they manage, right? So
yeah, great point.
It's so important that you set both sides up for success. And the way that I see it, that in-house marketing person is the conduit between, the managing partner and the agency. And they're providing that feedback loop between the two.
Yeah. Yeah. The partners are focused on clients. They don't have time to be watching the nuances of the metrics and reporting that back. So people like you on your end can make your adjustments in your campaigns. And it's never just turn it on and forget it, is it?
No, the work we do never stops. And I think, let me be more specific. I do think there are agencies out there that have that kind of set it and forget it mentality. And, there's reasons for that. I think no matter what, there always should be testing done on a marketing portfolio. And let's kind of like talk specifically about paid media, paid search, Google or Facebook, right? You can be testing new audiences. You can be testing new landing pages, calls to action. You can be testing new ad copy, kind of the
Right.
work that we do. It's an iterative process where we're just trying to level up. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, like, for big budgets, like those big Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, those games are won, in inches. I think it's won in inches in the legal space too. And the way that you continuously outrank and outpace and beat out your competition is by testing different things. Because you might be happy with, hey, my cost per lead and my cost per case right now is excellent. I don't need to optimize anything more. And you kind of keep that mentality for a year. Just wait. A competitor is going to come in and eat your lunch, right? So you have to continuously try to level up what you're doing, refine your targeting, figure out your value propositions, test new ad messages. And that's how you like I said, outrank your competition and keep getting cases at a viable cost.
Yeah, great point, Bo. As you were talking, I was thinking about how you never quit testing and you're always exploring there and you're always curious as to what's working and why it's working. One thing I've noticed around paid search and paid search agencies in particular is that generally speaking, what I've seen is that when an agency takes over a law firm's account, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, immediate wins, and you got to reorganize the account, start adding keywords, and there's a lot of work that goes into it for that first 6 months. And then there's a tail off where it's not as much low-hanging fruit optimization left. And then once you get into that 9 month to a year time frame, that's kind of when I've observed it start to happen. So how do you think about that? Have you seen that, one? Number two, in your agency, how do you start reallocating your resources there to serve those attorneys by doing other things for them other than just the paid search side?
Sure. First off, you're absolutely right. Any type of client engagement that we have, most of the work is done in that initial 6 month period, right? So that's from everything from like doing an assessment of the channels, making sure that all the tracking is set up properly, and then actually going and building new campaigns, the targeting, the ads, so on and so forth, right? By, we'll say the 6 month mark, yeah, I think that's where things kind of shift to more of like a maintenance approach. More emphasis is then put on setting up A/B tests, particularly on the landing page and the ad side of things. So making sure that we are, running structured tests that really the goal is to get incremental traffic and leads and cases, right? So there's a schedule that we follow for every single one of our accounts where we're trying to level those things up. The key is, in the legal context, some of those tests can take months because you need to reach statistical significance in order to confidently say, this is the better ad and this is why this ad is better, or this is the better landing page and this is why it's better, right? So those can be, a bit time consuming and it can take a while, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't be done. And then the other thing that we do that I think is unique in the marketplace is we end up becoming part like fractional intake directors, where we will actually consult the clients on, hey, we noticed that this call was missed. Is there a reason for that? Like, hey, we noticed that no calls are being answering past 6 p.m. on the weekdays. Have you considered, hiring an answering service to kind of pick up those calls for you? Hey, we noticed you don't have a script that you're following. And the reason we know that is because we listen to 5 calls and every single intake agent is picking up the phone a different way, right? So just by virtue of listening to the calls, we can find a lot of things that need to be improved. And, in my role as CMO at the injury law firm in Philly, I was actually in charge of intake there too. I think that's important to bring up because if there's a disconnect between marketing and intake, there's a very high likelihood that your firm is leaving money on the table. We really help with the testing side of things post 6 months. We really help with the intake side. And then really what we're trying to do ultimately for all of our clients is scale their firms, right? Yeah. So over the long term, that means evolving their budget, not just like increasing it, but evolving how the budget is being spent. And that's going to mean moving a greater proportion of the budget towards branding, more top of funnel awareness, and not just have all the budget sit in that like bottom of funnel, part of the marketing funnel, right? So I think those are kind of 3 things that post 6 months, those are the conversations that we're having with clients at that point.
Bo, that's so smart because let's just put it from a selfish perspective on your end. You want your agency to grow. And if you don't do those things for these firms, they'll eventually wise up and they'll move on. And I see agencies that just stick to their one or two things that they do, not trying to look at the business holistically, because that poor intake experience certainly impacts the marketing that you're doing, right? Because you can't capture the value you're creating, then it looks like you're not creating any value. So it's almost like a defensive play that you have to do these things and help these firms see that there is a holistic connection between the traffic, the phone call, answering the phone call, and turning that into dollars or new cases down the road.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We mentioned this before. Like, I think it's easy for me to go into conversations with clients and be like, well, look how many leads I drove you last month, right? The constant rebuttal that I'll get is, but I didn't sign any cases.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not in my control. Like, so it's kind of
you're held accountable for it, though.
Correct. And that's our way to be proactive and actually get our hands dirty and say, all right, well, we sent you these leads. And by the way, of the leads we sent you, 70% fit your qualified criteria. And of that 70%, you only signed 40% of them. So what's going on? Why aren't these being like, these are the conversations we have. And again, it kind of all gets prompted by listening to the calls and setting a expectation with the client that these are the things that we want to be tracking and we want to be seeing so that we can optimize our campaigns. There's plenty of lead generation agencies out there that'll just be like, you paid for the lead, it's up to you then. That's not how we operate. We want to get our hands dirty and we want to make sure that the leads that we are generating aren't getting squandered and that they're ultimately turning into cases.
Yeah. Most of those, they just count a phone call as their job's over with. They wash their hands up and move on, or they sell that same call to 3 other firms and it's a race to answer the phone. And most of the time that traffic is garbage anyway.
Right.
So
exactly.
You talked about statistical significance. I got to say that slow because I'll end up butchering it. You were doing that in the context of when you're taking an ad group, for example, I'll simplify this, taking an ad group and you're testing 2 different ads. You're sending half the traffic to ad A and half the traffic to ad B, to be real simple. What's the numbers you look for there on traffic, impressions, and then actions to determine whether or not you have enough significance to make a decision on which ad is the winner?
Yeah. In the context of ad testing, the key metric that you're going to be wanting to look at is click-through rate. So that's the ratio of clicks divided by the total number of impressions that your ad got, right? So if you got, let's say your ad got 1,000 impressions and 500 clicks, your click-through rate would be 50%, right? So in the context of A/B testing ads, you might have ad 1 and then you might have ad 2. And let's say that you run that test for a period of time. And at the end of the test period, you have, ad 1 has a 30% click-through rate and ad 2 has a 35% click-through rate. Statistical significance comes in and basically enables you to gauge whether or not there was enough data in that test to confidently say whether or not, ad 2 truly is outperforming ad 1, right? So there's this concept of like a confidence interval for those who paid attention during statistics, right? You can have different levels of confidence in that test. You can have an 80% confidence interval, you can have a 90%, you can have a 95% confidence interval. And the way that the confidence interval is typically determined is how much variation there is in performance between the 2 variables and how much data you have, right? So if let's say in that same example, ad 1 had a 30% click-through rate and ad 2 had a 31% click-through rate, you're going to need a lot of data in order to confidently say that ad 2 is better than ad 1, right?
Yeah.
Because there could be so much noise, things happening behind the scenes that are leading to ad 2 having a slightly better click-through rate. So I hope I didn't geek out on that too hard, but really the reason that you use statistical significance, and by the way, there are a ton of free calculators online that can help you do this. You don't need to have someone in-house, or your agency doesn't even need to be really well-versed in statistics to be able to run these types of tests. You literally can go find a free calculator, put in your 2 different test results for ad 1 versus ad 2, or landing page 1 versus landing page 2, and the calculator will spit back out a result that will tell you whether or not you've reached a a certain level of confidence in that test.
Yeah. That's really tough, quite honestly, for a lot of law firms because they're targeting and marketing in very small areas where the traffic, I mean, let's say divorce law. I mean, if you're advertising on the firm divorce lawyer, you could spend $25 to $75 per click. There's a fair amount of volume there. But if you want to really scale it down into something more long tail, you could be waiting quarters go by before you get enough data to make a decision on that. So it's really hard to do that in family law where you're small like that, which most of us are. So it's tough to do that. Let me ask you a hypothetical question, and I want to target this toward an attorney starting off to build her practice or someone that wants to take the practice from 1 to 3 attorneys, and they're just kind of dipping their foot into some serious digital marketing. So they come to you and they say, okay, Bo, I need like a 3-step plan or some plan. How would you take me to market from where I'm at right now? Let's assume they have a website with a small amount of traffic, but really not much presence in the maps and not spending any money yet. What would your game plan look like?
I know it's cliche, but we would start with the goal first and work our way backwards, right? So we would need to sit down and understand what the firm is trying to achieve in terms of number of cases open per month, like more specifically where they're at now in terms of the cases they're opening and where they're trying to go in terms of monthly cases open.
Let's say they're at 5 a month now with family law and they want to get to 20, which would basically support 3 attorneys.
Yep.
So they're a one woman shop and they want to get to 3. They gave you their checkbook and said, okay, Bo, go after it. What's it look like?
So we would then do some research based on the market they're in to understand how much that traffic would cost. And really the goal with doing that research is to help the client figure out a viable acquisition cost. To be more precise, how much it's going to cost per case, right? And those numbers need to make sense because if they don't, the client's not ready to begin advertising yet, right? So the ratios that we're looking at are the cost per click on the traffic. And then we're going to make some assumptions, hopefully not assumptions, hopefully the firm will have some data on this, but we're going to make some assumptions on how effectively their website will convert the traffic into leads and how effectively their intake team will convert the leads into cases, right? So it's really just doing some back of the napkin math, applying some ratios to figure out what that's all going to look like. And then if we can get those numbers to work out, if we think the assumptions are realistic, then it's an indication, all right, we could make this work. This is something that we should at least begin testing. So then it's figuring out really like the positioning of the firm, right? Yeah. So if this is a family law practice, we need to look at the competitors in that marketplace and understand what are their unique selling propositions? How are they marketing themselves as, the go-to family law practices in that area, and help that firm again, position themselves in such a way that stands out in that marketplace, right? So, it could be something unique about the managing partner's background. It could be something in terms of the types of cases that they take and their approach to those cases. But there needs to be some type of, I hate to use the phrase, but like almost like a secret sauce or something that we're highlighting that makes the firm unique relative to the competitors, right? And figuring that out and then making sure that that message is resonating on the ads, the landing pages, and I'll take it a step further, even included on the intake as well, making sure that kind of special sauce or that value proposition is being repeated over and over again. And then that's when, like, once we kind of figure those two things out, then it's just all the technical stuff. It's getting the campaigns set up. It's figuring out budget allocations. And typically for a smaller firm, we are going to recommend that they prioritize their budget more on bottom of funnel tactics. So what I mean by that, from a digital perspective, it's going to be Google pay-per-click, Google LSA, and Facebook retargeting, Instagram retargeting, and probably I would say Google and YouTube retargeting as well. It's really going after, to kind of simplify that, it's going after traffic that has very high intent to work with a family law attorney, and then setting up campaigns to capture people that might have been to your site, but they haven't called you or filled out a form yet, right? Yeah. And that's just the starting point. That's where I would start. And then once you get that optimized to a certain acceptable level, then it means you might be ready for some additional tactics like, and again, I'm just talking from a paid perspective right now, that could mean starting to target keywords that are more problem aware, right? So in the context of a family law attorney, that could be someone typing in how to initiate a divorce.
Yeah.
Right. They haven't specified that they want an attorney yet, but they're just starting to do some research on their divorce options. And so you can run paid campaigns and capture traffic and push that traffic onto pages of your site that answer those types of questions, right?
Yeah.
Or another example, further up the funnel would be running YouTube ads to people that, might fit your target demographic, but they haven't yet raised their hand and indicated that they're in the market for a family law attorney, right? So those types of things starting off, I think that's not where you want to be. You really want to be focusing your budget on, again, that traffic that's very solution aware, that knows that they need a family law attorney. Start there, optimize your budget on those types of tactics. And then once you get those to a good point, then you can start adding more pieces. And I know I use this like funnel analogy.
Yeah.
The bottom part of the funnel, really well optimized. The beauty of it is, as you add more tactics further up the funnel, it kind of creates this downward pressure where it's going to become increasingly easier and easier for these lower funnel campaigns to convert traffic into leads and leads into clients, right? So I think of it all as this one big cohesive funnel. And I'd see too many firms. The reason I'm like kind of harping on this and talking a lot about it is because I see a lot of firms that will kind of do the top of funnel stuff. Like maybe they'll go way up funnel and they'll buy a billboard or they'll run a TV ad, but they're not running any of these retargeting campaigns. They're not running Google pay-per-click campaigns. And I see it as such a missed opportunity because it's almost like pouring water into a leaky bucket. Like if they don't get this part of the funnel optimized and cleaned up, they're just going to be wasting their budget. They're just going to be pouring water into that bucket and water's just going to be coming out the side. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's really smart, especially being patient in those first couple months as you get to understand the firm, their USP, what makes them unique, because that's not returning dollars right away, but you got to dig that foundation and make sure you're tight before you start building on top of that. So you've talked a lot about the funnel. Let's go up to the top of the funnel though. This is where you're optimized now. You got that, you're really tight. Your intake process is going well. Your sales process is working out nicely. And not a lot of agencies talk about digital branding. And I'm using that broadly speaking. You can take that a bajillion different places, right? So how do you think about helping firms brand themselves top of funnel with in a digital way, not the billboard on the side of the road or the radio stuff and things like that, but top of funnel where this isn't high buyer intent stuff. This is people you're looking for impressions in people's brains about lawyers. How do you think about that? And how do you execute on that?
Sure. So from a paid perspective, that's going to mean going after cold traffic, right? These are people that haven't engaged in any behavior or done anything to indicate that they are in the market for your services, right? So I think the first thing is figuring out who your ideal client profile is and being more specific in terms of like the demographic, psychographic, and behavioral things that make them unique, right? So, if you're a family law practice, that might mean going after more affluent individuals, right? Maybe that's the type of person that you want to be going after. So if that's the case, you need to make sure that your branding investment is focused on the top, 10 highest income zip codes in your market or something like that, right? From a psychographic perspective, maybe they are interested in high-end cars, or they like, Gucci bags or things like that. So kind of like building this profile of who the client is, ideal client is, can really help you figure out where your ad placements should be, right? And who they should be served to.
Can I pause you there for a second? Because you're dropping gold here, and I don't want to step over something here. So in building the profile, and I'm going to be focused on our firm for a second because I know that we've got, 3,000 plus clients a year coming through our firm. And so we've got all the data, and we could easily give that to some third-party vendor and say, hey, build us a profile of this person. Do you guys do that? Probably not, I'm guessing. So who would you go to for that type of work, generically or specifically, to get a really tight profile that tells you what magazines they may have subscribed to, what websites they're visiting, all those things? Like Gucci bags, or do they like, Louis Vuitton bags, stuff like that?
There's the cheap way to figure that out, and then there's the expensive way. The cheap way would be to take your first party data, take all that information on, those 3,000 clients, or if you have like the last 5 years of clients, take a full list of like, if you're doing 3,000 a year, let's say it's 15,000, current and former clients, and you have it in this nice structured list, right? You can upload that data into Google Ads. You can upload that data into Meta, and they will actually build that profile for you. And you can target people that fit similar criteria as the people that are in that 15,000 list, right?
I could give thousands of records, what you're saying, that pick out the names, of course, but like where they live, all that sort of stuff. I have their address, all that. I can do cities and et cetera. I could upload that into Google or Meta, and they would then say, okay, here's your profile. Okay, got it. I didn't know about that.
So you can target, it's awesome. You can target those people specifically in that list. In this case, you wouldn't want to, or maybe you would. But the real beauty of doing that is you can start targeting people like that list. It's called a lookalike audience or a similar audience in Google.
Yeah.
And so you're giving these pieces of demographic information that Google can start to build a model off of and say, okay, this, John Doe over here, this guy kind of looks like him, so I'm going to serve an ad to him and see how he reacts to it, how he performs. That would be kind of square one. The thing that you're talking about is like bringing in a third party to build that that persona for you, which is fine. I think that there's value in that. I think it really only makes sense if you're going to be making a significant branding buy, right? Like in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. I think for smaller firms that want to be doing more branding, probably start with uploading your customer list into these platforms and building a lookalike off of them and start running ads to people that look like your client base. That's I think a starting point. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck out of the gates.
Because I'm not paying anything to Google and Meta for giving me that analysis. No, I'm just buying ads from them, obviously.
Exactly. And the other thing we didn't talk about, which I'm just going to briefly touch on, is kind of similar to what I said about uploading data into Google and Meta. There's something that came out in the last couple of years called offline conversions. This is basically sending data back into Google and Meta that tells those platforms of the leads that you generated for me, these are the ones that turned into cases, right? And the reason that's so incredibly valuable is because Google and Meta's targeting algorithms can start optimizing more and more to people, or days of week, or hours of day, or device types, whatever, slice and dice of data that they have the control over. They can start optimizing towards those types of things that lead to cases and not just leads. So much, part of the reason why we help our clients a lot with the reporting and the analytics is because so much of what we do is contingent on the quality of data that our clients have. So we feel it's almost our responsibility to make sure that attribution and tracking is in place so that we can keep making these platforms smarter and smarter and smarter. They're all using machine learning algorithms today. So really what I'm saying is a long-winded way of saying the quality of your data can really dictate the quality of your advertising performance. If you do a really good job of keeping that data clean and accurate and you're feeding it back into these platforms, you're giving yourself a fighting chance. You're enabling yourself to get your most bang for your buck.
Fascinating. Boy, this has been really informative to me. So I hope it's been informative to everyone listening. I'm sure it has been, but thank you so much for what you've shared so far on this. So Bo, how would someone get a hold of you and connect with you and learn more about what you're able to do for them?
Yeah, I would go to our website, legal.paretopppc.com. You can get more information about our services there. And if you're interested in speaking with me, you can book a call. I'm pretty active on YouTube. You can check out our YouTube channel, Pareto Legal. And on that channel, you'll find that we have a podcast as well, the Pareto Legal Podcast. So for anyone that wants to kind of stay up to date on these things, you can follow me there. And I'm pretty much posting a video a week these days.
Cool. Now, Pareto, Pareto.
Yep.
Yeah, you said that so quick. I don't want to miss that. So it's Pareto, or it's legal.pareto.ppc?
legal.paretoppc.com.
Got it. Okay. I'm glad I asked. Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Jeff. I really appreciate it.